morning. Welcome to the old school, part two. Perhaps little technical difficulties there at the onset, but this podcast is about the American education system, a institution like none other, in both good ways and bad ways. And we're here to discuss it along with Herr Dr. Bourgeois. Good morning, Dr. Bourgeois.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. You mentioned an institution. It's funny that you personally have placed yourself in an institution for about 25 years.
I have. And well, I was in an institution before that, as you recall, because I was in the military.
Right.
So I've been in one institution or another for quite some time, really my whole life. So.
Okay. And when you decide to leave that one, you may go into another one, or are you going to try to avoid institutions altogether?
I think the next institution that I find myself in will have some nice padded walls. And,
so that's the result of your time. I think you're probably exaggerating a little bit. I think teaching is fun, isn't it?
It certainly can be, but it does take a toll. I mean, you can look as old as the current president and be like 25 years old and at public education. It takes that kind of toll on you. So
it really does. And then from my experience, you also have a relatively short memory. I mean, you can have this horrible day. My worst days were early on when I was substitute teaching, and I would just get home and sit in a chair and just kind of close my eyes and wonder what the hell was that. And then you get up the next day and walk in the door and you have a short memory, kind of like a good quarterback.
Yeah. Anytime. Well, yes, you do have to. It is not unlike that of a professional athlete where you're trying to put behind you all the things that happened the day before. And hopefully you can, you have the opportunity to do better the next time. Don't let the defeat happen twice, as it were. So who knows?
Yeah, a lot happens in a school day and in a classroom. And if you're self-aware, you have some reaction to them. It could just be the tone of a student's word or how you may have overreacted or underreacted. But all these decisions, have about 150 yes/no decisions every day. And if you're thoughtful, those come back to you. And a lot of teachers have this skill. I never had it, where they can kind of just keep driving and it doesn't seem to stick, at least outwardly. But I never had that. I would, kind of think about everything, take it a little bit personally.
I think if you are a teacher and the decisions you make on a day in and day out basis and the reactions to those decisions by students does not bother you or does not perplex you beyond the time that you spent within the four walls of that school, I would suggest there might be something wrong with you.
I think so. And
because if you care, if you have any kind of care in what you do, it's going to bother you. The difference is how much.
How much and how quickly you can move on. Because think about teaching. We've both been in schedules. I don't think you have one now, but where you teach 6, 7, even 8 classes. Maybe you teach 7 out of 8 in a day. So you have a class. The bell rings. That's maybe a 40-minute class. You have to suddenly adapt. There's a new group in front of you with new challenges, and you transition. And so you really can't be thinking too much about that first group, no matter what happened, because you need your energy for the next one. And then repeat 7 times, repeat 5 days a week for however many weeks. So there's a lot of transitions and a lot of opportunities to stew on something or let it go.
You see, you certainly cannot, you cannot dwell on the moment, at the moment. But, one of the best things about when you and I worked together and then we would drive home together because we, were carpooling, that, it gave both of us a chance to decompress in a way that ordinarily we would not have been able to do. Because, one of the things my wife had to learn when she and I married, or rather when we began to cohabitate. I hate to break the news that we cohabitated before we were married.
This is shocking. You'll probably be fired.
Yes, it will be canceled by certain elements
for good reason. Yeah,
for good and darn right too. Quite right. But I think one of the things she had to learn was, I think, twofold. One was that you spend all day talking to one degree or another. The last thing you want to do when you get home is talk, and so you have that element and you have that dynamic. And then the second thing was dealing with all of the decisions that you made that day. And, some days are easier to set it aside than others. But, I think that's just the life of a teacher. And I think every teacher can recognize that. And, to whatever degree they have a support system at home that allows them to not talk or to be able to decompress. It is something that affects not just you, but everybody else around you, or it certainly has the ability to affect everybody around you.
So you think that accounts for the phenomenon of aging teachers who they can teach 2 or 3 years and they look like they've aged 10 years.
I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly grayer than I was when I started, but then that's just a product of aging. But I think it's not unlike, I don't want to equate it to parenting because I care more about my kid than I do other kids.
I think so, yeah.
But I think there is something to it is similar in that decisions you make, at the risk of kind of hyperbolic comparisons, the decisions you make have much longer term potential consequences than, say, the ordinary job with the ordinary decisions. And I am under no illusions that my kids carry my words, years on afterwards. But you do hear, mostly thankfully on the good side, you get letters and cards from students who say, I remember when you said this, I remember when you said that, and it had an impact on me. And so if I'm getting letters and cards suggesting that positive things that I've said have carried over well beyond the actual class time, then certainly the opposite is true as well. And there was a band in the 80s called Big Country, and they had a line in one of their songs that says, "I never took the smile away from anybody's face." And it's the idea, and I've always thought about that in how I interact with people, even when I have to have tough conversations with people. You try not to make it personal, but it can't help sometimes to be personal because you're talking about a student's ability or a student's level of care or interest or what have you. So it's a tricky balance.
Wow, that's a good line here, Miller. I never heard that line before.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you say something completely new. Marvel. I think I tend to repeat my stories, and they come around again. That's the beautiful thing, because 10 years later, people haven't heard it. Oh, okay. I forgot.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about having old cultural references, is that the kids, you will always have a new group of kids who haven't heard your jokes because your jokes are 30 years old.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you can use, if you use any type of philosophical reference or reference to literature, there's no reason they don't think that you came up with it yourself.
Right.
No one's read it.
You see one kid look at the other. Damn, that was pretty profound. Mr. Miller really is pretty top notch. So
that's right. And then the other.
Now, speaking of philosophy.
Yes. Yeah.
Go. Speaking of philosophy, I was actually able to start something this week that you and I have talked about for several years now, and that is the idea. Say again.
I forgot about that. You told me a lot this week. I thought we were going in a different direction, but do continue. I love this story.
Well, the story is that you and I both share a love of philosophy. And no doubt my love and interest and capacity to understand philosophy has been deepened since our friendship, because we talk about it so often, both in terms of education, but also beyond education. And we had the idea of what it would be like if we asked our students, hey, I'm going to start this philosophy group. There's no grade. It's not a club. You won't get a cord on your graduation nightgown that you have to wear or any of that stuff. But wouldn't it be cool to simply look at a philosophical text, to discuss it, to see where our thoughts are in relation to what the author is trying to convey, and simply just have this rather altruistic pursuit of philosophical understanding and exploration. And so this year, I announced that I was going to try to do it, maybe because I have a deep motivation for this to be my last year. So I think, well, if I'm going to do it, this is the time to do it.
All your harebrained ideas are going to snap this year.
Okay. If it goes horribly wrong, I'm already 1 foot out the door anyway. It doesn't matter. But no, to have a kind of a collection of folks who may have an interest. And this past week, we had our first meeting, and it was, I say meeting, it sounds too official, but
a meeting of the philosophy club. Is that what you call it?
Well, here's the problem. So I don't want to call it a club, because you call it a club and pretty soon people are equating it to all the other clubs on campus, and ours is not like those others.
Meaning it's not officially sanctioned.
It's not officially sanctioned, and it is not with us as it is with others who seek something kind of, not necessarily shallow. I mean, it depends on the club, of course. Some clubs are more seriously intent than others, but ours is simply, just a volunteer collection of folks who find interest in philosophy.
Okay.
So we met this past week, and the students told me a little bit about what it was that they were interested in. One of the things to kind of help start lasering in on particular topics is to find, what the students themselves are interested in. And so I did that on this past week. Next week, they're going to be receiving both text and a video lecture on a particular topic. And after that, we're going to discuss it, give them a few weeks. The idea is that this is not meant to be particularly laborious. I know they have their own weights they have to carry with their other classes. So give them plenty of time to read it, and then have the opportunity to come together and discuss it.
Well, I love the idea. Of course, I mean, I've done it. I can impart what I experienced, but I'm curious how. I mean, was it a packed room? With people outside spilling out, trying to get into this?
No, it wasn't. So I don't know what kind of experience you had.
Well, I was a little more popular than you, apparently.
Well, it's a problem. I knew it wouldn't take long before,
No, let's get into the content. I want to know what you. I mean, you said it's almost a flipped classroom. Do you make the lecture that you record yourself opining, and then or is it something canned from some other philosopher other than Mr. Miller?
No, it's not me. I mean, I'm not. But I mean, there's other folks, and there's very easily accessible lectures or explanations or discussions that can be found that can kind of augment and perhaps further explain a particular philosophical idea. And so there's no reason for me to be the source of this. What I kind of consider my role to be is that of mentor, and that is that of just kind of guiding the discussions that we have in our little group, challenge people often, and to challenge everybody. So part of it really requires a lot of me to be up to speed enough on the topic to be able to make those kind of questions. Let's see where it goes. I hope that the students like it, and I hope that they get something from it. Maybe a pursuit of the most worthless degree in the university system, a degree in philosophy.
You're now demeaning what you're talking about. I can't believe this.
It's not a question of demeaning it. It's a question of accurately assessing the societal value that's placed upon philosophy, which is not that great. And so...
Okay, but I mean, getting a degree in philosophy, an undergraduate degree, has a lot of benefits, particularly if you want to be in a profession where you have to speak and think and write. Nothing wrong with that.
Sure, but I think if you're setting yourself out to be, I want to be a philosopher.
Well, you'd be sitting
I'm reminded of the line from History of the World Part One. It's a guy where Mel Brooks said he was a stand-up philosopher, and then be author.
A handsome woman.
Yes, a handsome woman, a powerful woman.
Yeah.
I would probably be scared if I was in the presence of B. Author. And especially now, she's passed away some time ago. But
that's an image now.
But particularly in her heyday, she was a powerful, imposing, and amazing lady.
Yeah,
and so she had her own response that I'll allow y'all to search out for yourself. But
no, we need to stop. But your technique is to not come in with an agenda or a syllabus, or we're going to start with the pre-Socratic philosophers and then work our way forward. Rather, you start out with the interest of the students, and you build from there. And I think that seems, is that right? You don't have an agenda. We're going to cover material. You're going to follow their interest.
I'm going to follow their interests and basically make it more of an organic. I think if you try to take too much control, in the words of 38 Special, you need to hang on loosely and don't let go. Just kind of allow kind of a general type of organic movement between topics and within topics. And so I think that's probably the best way to go. This is not meant to be anything where I am controlling anything. I don't need that, but rather I want them to have the joy of exploring this on their own. So we'll see how it transpires. But yes, start with their interest. And so I had a couple, as I said, the conversation this past week had them explaining a little bit about where their interests lie. And some people were talking about existentialism, or one young lady was mentioning existentialism. One was talking about, bioethics. One was talking about the notion of what is nature and what is nurture, as far as looking at individual characteristics. Is there a way to kind of, classify in a general sense what kind of things tend to be man created, what kind of things tend to be by nature or by God. And so, giving them the opportunity to delve into their own ideas, give the students a chance to maybe explore some of the ideas that others have brought to the table, and maybe look at something with fresh eyes, I think is kind of an exciting idea. And I'm excited for the first conversation. I mean, we've already had the first conversation. I had a young lady who said that she's never really been into philosophy, or she's certainly not in kind of an official or organized sort of way. But she's intrigued. And I told her, I said, wow, I said, you may have been in philosophy a lot longer than you think, because it starts with curiosity. Why is something the way it is? And then the exploration goes into trying to understand that. And so I think any curious person already has at their core the central ingredient to being a philosopher.
Well, I think that other teachers should take the risk and step up and do this, because the model is not that complicated. I mean, you outline something where there's essentially, about 20, 30 minutes of preparation where you send a link, and then and maybe you familiarize yourself with the topic, which is not I mean, it's actually something you enjoy. So I think other teachers should try it. I go back to the mid 90s when I was teaching a young teacher, I think popular, and I had a similar idea. I took a little bit more of a heavy hand as far as organizing it, but I think that the insight I had is that students didn't want to meet at school because then it felt like school,
Right.
Because they're in a classroom, they're surrounded, they have residual stress being in a classroom and having teachers ask them questions, which is essentially what this exercise is. So we went to a coffee shop and actually there was a special room, that we could occupy. And it was a full house. I mean, we had, between 8, 12, 15 people sometimes. And so we announced it, but it was a certain type of student, who would in the 90s go to a coffee house that was, I think, before Starbucks or anything. Coffee shops were a little bit different back then. But yeah, so we would come up with, we'd have this introductory conversation, and I heard a lot of the same things. I don't know much about philosophy, but I'm interested. But what surprised me, was that there were some students that didn't meet that profile. Kind of the I don't know what you would call them. I was real big with the Gothic type students, a little bit counterculture. But then we had some pretty straight laced athletes and people you wouldn't expect who showed up. And I thought there's something here, because these are students who would rarely interact with each other, and here they are in a room, every week.
Even in my group of 5, we have that similar dynamic. There is that, and it's stereotypical, and so you kind of take it for what it's worth. But there is the stereotypical idea of what kind of kid might be drawn to this sort of thing. But even within my small group, there are exceptions. And what I hope happens is that as the group begins to develop and grow and get more involved in their pursuits, that other kids, almost like a black hole, they'll get sucked into the group, and they'll start to say, what is this about? What are they doing? Why are they having so much fun discussing some of these things? And hopefully we have the opportunity to grow this little cabal that we've got going. Who knows? I mean, that's the hope. And it is exciting to see those different groups of folks inhabit the same space for the same reason.
Well, I'd like to give a few things, if anybody wants to try this, in my experience. I mean, what you described kind of reminded me a little bit of the Breakfast Club. You have these suddenly coming together. But what I did was create the syllabus myself, because I'm the one who knows what the texts are and so forth, and I'm focused on existentialism, things that they might have more. If you're talking to teenagers, existentialism sounds a lot like angst, and it fits. So that's a recommendation rather than going back to utilitarianism and things that would be perceived as academic, and I don't think you want that. But I had the idea of doing a kind of a flipped idea or flipped structure where I would they would volunteer for these topics. So I'd explain the books, and then they would say, okay, I'm going to pick that one, meaning they're going to be the group leader. They come in with questions, and which sounds great, because we're handing an order to them. I'm just participating at that point. They come in and ask the questions, and the other people respond, having read, the book or the passages that I gave them. But what do you think happened in that scenario with, say, 12 people and a text on one day? One person is assigned asking questions. How do you think it went?
would imagine there were some growing pains.
In what way? Flesh that out a bit, because I want to see if you can anticipate what might happen with your own.
Well, I can imagine, especially in the beginning, there might be a kind of a tendency towards almost preaching a little bit. Once someone has the ability to kind of look at something and then, if they're presenting it, it's their responsibility to present it. Maybe questions don't come as easily from the group, and those questions that do come aren't easily answered. That's like an immediate thing that jumps to mind that might have happened.
Well, the idea is that they're just asking the question, so they're kind of serving as moderator,
right?
So they don't need to do a presentation first or anything, but
okay,
that is a skill, and so through this task, learning how to facilitate conversation is a wonderful thing. But as you also might have expected, not everybody does the reading, just like your own classes, you can imagine. And so you have some kids who are clearly faking it,
right?
And they're expert at that, and they end up talking about other things, but trying to sound smart. But others actually did the reading and had real conversation. So there was some thinning of the group, because it did feel a little like, okay, we have to do something for this. It's not just drinking coffee, but that's okay. But eventually there was a core group. We expanded the topics or the process to also occasionally include films.
Right.
And that was back before we had we were just getting computers or whatever. So basically somebody brought a TV and a VCR in there, set it up, and we would watch the video, something that I would select, hopefully kind of carefully, but we pushed the envelope a little bit because it was not on school grounds. I don't know I think it was officially a club. A club didn't have all the trappings of what they do today, where you have to go through all these hoops. But it was a lot of fun, definitely. And I don't know why other teachers wouldn't do something like that. And it doesn't have to be a philosophy club. It could be a poetry club, whatever. But the concept is that it's voluntary and for the most part, student driven and student run. It would be even better.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that, of course, makes mine different than what you put together. One, I think because we don't have the large numbers, I think perhaps we start out with a core group, and perhaps the small numbers might heighten a student's desire or feelings of responsibility to read, because it is not as easy to hide if you're in a philosophy group of 5 as opposed to 10 or 15. And so where you had kind of a culling out to some degree of students, I think perhaps the fact that mine has started out small, maybe you don't see that as much, although certainly I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's going to be folks that are not going to read. And then they'll try to use what they see as their own intellect to be able to carry them through. And it's going to be a little bit embarrassing, perhaps, for some of these kiddos.
Yeah, it can happen. But I mean, looking back, I had some really impressive students, who went on to do some great things. Went to really top-notch colleges, and it's a great exercise because the conversation was really it was focused, and that's, I guess, the role of the teacher, or the whatever you want to call yourself, is to keep them focused to a point without making it feel academic. And that's a little bit hard sometimes, because by nature we press students, and I think you'll find yourself behaving a little differently than in history class.
Well, I hope so, because I think there are various philosophers who kind of rejected the kind of formalized study of philosophy, people like Wittgenstein or Hegel or what have you. And so, perhaps, taking this much more kind of relaxed approach, but also in some degrees taking a more practical approach to philosophy. And Wittgenstein himself said it. It's that philosophy is not supposed to be navel gazing. It's supposed to be the idea of creating ideas that have a practical application in some cases, where you're trying to change a process, you're trying to change a form, you're trying to change a perspective on something. It is an activity. It's not just staring into the ether. And so for my students, trying to get them to see that, I hope by keeping it informal, it might accentuate that idea. But you never know. I mean, this could be a disaster. I don't know what it's going to look like. My thought, though, is that I have some very thoughtful students, who have expressed an initial interest, and I can't help but think that, like you, there will be some good that comes from this, and there'll be some students who greatly benefit from this.
Well, all that's really required is just one question. You start the session with a question, and maybe it just organically turns into something. And if not, you ask another question. So I'm really hopeful. I hope that others out there, at least, because let's think about what you're doing. You're an accomplished teacher. You've taught for many years. You're very confident, and for teachers new to the building, new to the profession, there's a risk doing that. And I think we've talked about this before. Are we in a culture, an environment today where teachers are comfortable taking a risk? Because philosophy is a little bit different than some, say, an art class where they're building things or whatever. But these are ideas, and ideas are rather explosive these days. So do you think that teachers would be open to taking the risks that you are right now?
Well, I think there is no environment to encourage teachers to take risk. And so from a kind of an institutional point of view, certainly there is no one encouraging students or teachers to try something like this, or even to think in this direction. But I think one of the things that young teachers should understand is that in engaging in a group like this, it is not necessary for you to be the expert.
Right.
This could be a learning experience both for you and the students. Now, hopefully you know enough that you can help direct and shape the conversation if you have to, if the students, are not particularly communicative one day. But at the same time, I think it's important that that teachers give themselves the license to not know everything. I've taught history for 27 years, but to suggest, it's always the kiss of death. It's the idea of if you were on Jeopardy and you were giving a history question and all the audience members know you're a history teacher. So, this guy's got it. And then you get it wrong. And you're like, the hell kind of history teacher is this? Boo, get him off the stage. Thumbs down like Caesar or something like that. Yeah. You've been carted out to the lions. And so, I think to suggest that just because you teach something that you automatically know everything, well, that's not good for your own mental health. But two, I think it's also good to kind of put yourself in the position of the student. And I think that's okay to do that. And so as long as you have a good group of kiddos, and as long as you have a subject that you can kind of help shape a group to discuss, I think that's enough. And I think as long as you're open with yourself and open with the other students. Now, meeting off campus, those were the heady days of the 90s when you could do something like that.
It was a better era. It was much more like,
So there's no way in hell I would meet my students outside of class or outside of school. So they're going to have to be content with the institutional cinder block walls of our classroom to kind of consider all things philosophy. But
yeah, it was the wild, wild west. But you ideally, who you can see who's doing the talking. And if the students are talking or the group members more than you, that's a good thing. we don't want a moderator like John McLaughlin. Wrong. I could picture that. It would be funny, but I don't know. You could do your exercise where you talk about bias. Where you make mistakes and you're biased and you intentionally pervert the truth, and they call you on it, and see if you get complaints about your philosophy club.
Well, for those who heard earlier podcast episodes, they know that doesn't really turn out too well. But who knows?
Well, I have high hopes for this. So you're meeting weekly?
No, not weekly, because we met this past week, and so this weekend I'm trying to find a text. Well, first I have to decide on the subject, and then I want to find a text from a particular philosopher on the topic, and then maybe find like a companion piece, lecture or discussion on the topic, and then maybe in 3 weeks' time, give them an opportunity, a chance to read in conjunction with their other duties and responsibilities, and then meet again and talk about it, and then head on to the next topic. So that's kind of the rough draft of where we are. So again, I did not come into this wanting it to be any one particular thing. I didn't come into this for it to have any kind of particular structure, but rather just to see where the students take it. And if the students' desire is such that they want to meet more often, or that they find out that they do have time to read this, whatever text it is, quicker, then we can kind of adjust our schedule. But to kind of start a little bit easy and see where their extra time takes them and see how the conversation goes. I was thinking, though, about if you had the opportunity to create anything else beyond philosophy, can you think of a similar type of group? I was thinking about the idea of what would other teachers do? What could young teachers do? What kind of topics could they cover, do you think, that might have a similar potential benefit both to the teacher and the students? What would you do beyond philosophy?
Well, I think, film is a natural for that. And it's in some ways easier because you watch something and then you hold a discussion, after.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of, teachers could do that. I would do that. I have a lot of interest in film. Music appreciation. I mean, I taught a course essentially in that, but that structure would work outside of school as well, where, the students are bringing in pieces that we listen to and we discuss, and then the same thing, and I would bring things to the table as a musician and so forth. But that type of structure, probably fits for a lot of topics, including, literature, and you really have to have the right type of students who would do additional reading. But I guess yours are doing the same. But I think something, I would lean to my own interests, which are music and philosophy, film. So it's I think for me, a pretty short list.
I think the benefit here is just the idea or the chance for students to engage in something that's not required, to engage in something that does not fit this paradigm of they got to do a certain grade in order to get into the right college or whatever the case may be. It's a real pressure that a lot of my students face. You can see it on their faces. Mm-hmm. So I think for my kiddos, it's an opportunity to explore what interests them. As a history teacher, I try to find, ways of explaining history where even if it does not directly relate or impact or is relevant to the student, is nevertheless interesting, noteworthy, worthy of study. Here, you can fully give yourself over to the interests of the students and try to, through study and through reading and discussion, you have the opportunity to kind of explore some of these ideas with them. And so,
well, I have an idea for you, Herr Miller.
Let's hear it.
I do my little chuckle, and it was my show.
Because here's the problem: your ideas. I'll never forget one of the first. I hate to sidetrack your idea
No,
here, but just
I'll
for a
probably
second.
Go ahead.
The first time you offered me advice,
Yeah,
in our early nascent stages of our friendship, you told me some advice. I said, "Would you do that?" And you go, "Oh no, I wouldn't do that." But
right.
that's what you should. That's what you should do.
Yeah. I get to be entertained by your stories. That's the whole point here. But as a history teacher, you know where the interest is of those students, and you're holding back on them. If you you don't need to call it a history club. You could call it the World War II Club. And you bring in clips from the History Channel and you tell them what they want to hear. And they talk about the one topic that history students want more than anything else. And you're just the man to do it.
Well, no. and I think you damn well know that I would never have created a group like that. So
come on, you could call it the World War II Club.
You're jerking my chain.
No, you could pull it off. You could enlighten them that it's more than what you see on the History Channel.
It's more than what you get from your point of view shooter videos and.
Oh no. But there's definitely groups out there with all kinds of interests that are not being tapped, and
it can be anything.
Yeah, I mean they're limited to these core subjects. Electives have gone the way of the dinosaur. I mean, there are some, and
yes.
I think now with these tracks of graduation that actually helps the elective programs. Thank goodness. But there aren't that many choices, and certainly for free, we would call it altruistic intellectual endeavor. There aren't many opportunities.
It is probably perhaps the worst in impact. It is probably the worst collateral damage of the current mindset with regards to graduation requirements and course selection. That you could say that yes, music and art classes are still there. But they're particularly only for those people who track in that direction. But if you were a science person and you just happen to love or were interested in art, your chances of getting into an art class become much more difficult because your counselor is going to sit there and tell you, well, you also have to take this, and this. Maybe you don't have time for art. And, so they know, yes, you're right. The notion of high school as a open exploration of ideas and subject matter to find out what you're interested in, that has clearly dissipated. And so, and to our detriment, I would suggest.
Absolutely. And so the students or their parents are having to make real difficult decisions between very interesting potential areas. And then there's also the grading and the weighted grades of advanced placement courses and honors courses. And most, I would say typically elective courses don't have that extra weight. And so they, for people who are seeking high GPAs, they really hurt their overall GPA. So some of our students who are trying to become valedictorian and so forth are avoiding those one-offs like the plague in a way, because they just pull them down, and if they take a couple of those, they're never going to get that top spot.
Well, there's a lot of things that have been placed on the altar of education for sacrifice, and I think we spent the last 45 minutes here talking about some things that I think we would be better off. I think the teachers and the students would get a great deal out of these kinds of explorations. Maybe it's better in some ways that philosophy is not a quote unquote class. Then it becomes simply one more thing to pass, one more thing to ace, one more thing to put into the ledger of your GPA ranking. And perhaps this makes it a more real, perhaps in the end, better experience that we're doing it this way. Yet on some level, I'm sad that we have to do it this way, that we cannot do it in a way that could allow more students to take part. But
yeah, well, it would be institutionalized. Imagine the last hour of every day is for clubs that are ad hoc clubs created by every teacher, and then students just run into whichever room would be of interest, and they have, you could imagine how quickly that becomes formalized, and
right.
the grading starts, and everything that you're doing is the opposite of that, because it's organic, it's creative. You don't even know what you're going to be reading, which is kind of refreshing to me.
Sure. Yeah, I think so as well. So I'm excited. We'll see how it goes, and we'll do updates from time to time on the podcast to kind of circle back around and find out how these intrepid explorers of philosophy are doing. But until then, college football calls, and we must go. And I wish you the very best of the weekend, Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
Well, same to you, but more of it, Herr Miller.
Indeed.
Indeed. Auf Wiedersehen.
Mazel tov.